That was beautiful. Sometimes it's hard to come up and talk after you worship like that. Just was sitting there thinking we should be doing more of this. Just worshiping God. For He is the Lord. He is the shepherd of this flock. So we're in Lent. You come in it every Sunday and you see this board over here. And for some people, that's like a guilt board. Let's be honest, you look at it and you're like, I haven't done anything. I haven't given up anything. I haven't decided to serve. I'm not memorizing. I haven't put anything up here. That is not what that's for. It really is a tool, as Ed mentioned, to just be able to give people ideas for different things you're doing. But sometimes when we're focused on Lent and trying to do something different and transform our life and change things, it's challenging, right? So I'm going to give a little bit of a Lent experience I had. For any of you who are struggling a little bit during Lent, this may help you. This was on Ash Wednesday. I like to write down things that happen to me afterwards and just reflect. So it starts out, Ash Wednesday, first day of Lent. I decided that for 40 days I would give up something. Let's just say it's an unhealthy emotion that I've been letting seep into my life far too frequently. So off with its head, no more, over and out for 40 days. I've prayed about this, prepared, ready, set, go. I didn't tell anybody who I know really well what I'm giving up because I'm hoping they're going to see the amazing transformation by the end of the 40 days. Come home from work, had a fight with my husband. Not just a run-of-the-mill fight, but a fight where the dogs get nervous. A fight that brought up our differences, our insecurities, our inabilities to hear or see each other for who we are and for who we're becoming. I'll lose your appetite. Hope it's just a bad dream. Where are my car keys? How far can I drive to wherever? Kind of fight. Ash Wednesday. I'm off to a great start. Where are you, Jesus? And why, when I'm preparing for peace, do I find I'm at war? That can happen in Lent, right? Now, I'm going up on the stage not because I feel I'm special, although that is how God sees me. It's because our lights are burned out and my husband has asked me to come up. So that's why I'm up here. And I can see so much better. Feel all powerful. So not long ago, I talked with a gentleman. His name is Adam Alter, and he's written a book on our addiction to technology. It's called Irresistible. In it, he claims our attention span is now just 8 seconds. Just 8 seconds before we become distracted by something. For a goldfish, it's 9. Then, a friend sent me some research the same week about women when they're speaking. Now, you've probably heard before that women use many more words in a day than men on average, right? But when women and men are together, it's actually men who talk the most. For example, in a classroom or a meeting where men and women are both present, research shows that women on average talk only a third as much. And yet, perception when you question men afterwards is that the women talked far more than they really did. So, given your waning attention span and the fact that I am a woman, and some of you already think I've talked longer than I should have, maybe I'll just give the benediction and we can go home. Fragility. People are fragile. Sometimes you can just walk into a certain place, maybe when you walk into church, that'll put you in touch with how fragile you are. What's good about being fragile is what Mike talked about last week in Psalm 121, that God wants us to be in a position where we're asking Him for help, where we're looking to Him. So this week we'll be studying Psalm 95, part of which Aaron read in our worship. And then I'm going to read the last few verses and focus on those today. Fragility. Part of Lent is about staring into the face of Jesus as he hangs on a cross for us instead of us and takes on all of our fragility, our brokenness, upon himself. He is the ultimate scapegoat, the lamb who was slain, literally, the sacrifice to end all sacrifices, right? So I just want to pray real quick. Father, thank you for a place to come and just think about you. Thank you for the season of Lent. Calm our hearts. Sometimes when we prepare for something meaningful, everything can get turned upside down and we don't know why. But we rely on the power of your Spirit to change us, to live in us. It's your breath in our lungs. That's what it is. So we're going to count on that today, Father. In Jesus' name, amen. Most of us don't like to be tricked. Like we don't want to go to a store that advertises a sale on something, and then we get there, we find out, well, there are certain conditions with the sale, or they're out of what they were advertising. Well, reading this psalm can make you feel a little bit like you've been tricked. Because it starts out, and if you want to turn to Psalm 95, you can. Starts out, come let us sing for joy to the Lord, the rock of our salvation. Goes on to say, the Lord is great. He's made everything, including us. We're his people. He's taking care of us. Yay. Celebration. Everyone's happy. And then, boom, you get to the end of verse 7 and kind of slam into the rest of the psalm. End of verse 7. Today, if you would only hear his voice. God is speaking here. Do not harden your hearts as you did at Meribah, as you did that day at Massah in the wilderness, where your ancestors tested me. They tried me, though they had seen what I did. For 40 years I was angry with that generation. I said, they are a people whose hearts go astray, and they have not known my ways. So I declared on oath in my anger, they shall never enter my rest. Wow. Wow. What happened to the celebration in the beginning? Seems kind of harsh, right? So we're not going to go back to the history of Israel being led through the wilderness, which God is referencing here. The Israelites attributed to him all of their problems. In their eyes, whatever went wrong was God's fault. So they worshiped other gods. They didn't trust what God had told them. They didn't listen to what God said. They were unresponsive to him and calloused. Their hearts were hard. Even though there was much evidence that God was caring for them, sending them food, bringing them water, delivering from the Red Sea, but kind of like a boss who wonders, that was yesterday, what have you done for me lately? What have you done for me today? How have you proved your worth today? The Israelites had a short memory. And God did not see that generation to the promised land. So we kind of go from celebrating who God is early in Psalm 95, an invitation to celebrate, let us worship, let us bow down, let us kneel before the Lord our God, to God's anger and disappointment in his people. So there are two thoughts up here that I want to focus on. One is, today, if you would hear his voice. And the other is, do not harden your hearts. Because I think listening for his voice helps our hearts become more sensitive, more alive, undivided, and turn toward him. That's what the day that Kit was just up here and Greg talking about is supposed to help us do. Okay, I want to read a couple more verses. In the Old Testament book of Ezekiel, so we're talking about 7 books after Psalm, chapter 11, starting in verse 17, the prophet Ezekiel has heard from God, and here's what God says to Israel now, okay? Now, he's going to give him another chance. I will gather you from the nations and bring you back from the countries where you have been scattered, and I will give you back the land of Israel again. You will return to it and remove all its vile images and detestable idols. I will give you an undivided heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. A divided heart becomes hard. In the verse following, he reminds them to follow him, to hear his voice, and to leave their other gods behind. In the New Testament, jumping way far ahead, in Hebrews 3, The Holy Spirit reminds us of what God said in Psalm 95, which I love that, when you read the Old Testament and it connects with the New Testament. So here's what it says, Hebrews 3, starting in verse 7. Today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as you did in the rebellion during the time of testing in the wilderness that we read about in Psalm. Your hearts were always going astray. You did not know his ways. Today, if you hear his voice, the sheep know the shepherd's voice. Moses reminds the Israelites that they can choose life or death. In Deuteronomy 30, verse 16 and following, love the Lord your God, walk in obedience to him, keep his commands, choose life. Love the Lord, listen to his voice, and hold fast to him. So his voice matters, and our hearts matter. Revelation 3:20, here I am. I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person and they with me. And isn't it interesting that we're always an active part of the equation? So God is active. He's doing things all the time, right now. But we have to be active in the relationship. We must listen. We must open the door. We must not harden our hearts. Psalm 29, 3 and 4, the voice of the Lord is over the waters. The voice of the Lord is powerful. The voice of the Lord is majestic. And John 10, 3 through 5, talking about Jesus, our shepherd. The sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and he leads them out. When he's brought out all of his sheep from the pen, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they don't recognize the stranger's voice. In verse 14, Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. And I lay down my life for the sheep. So question is, do we know the shepherd's voice? Do we listen for his voice? Do we take time to hear it? Do we read his words? Because some of us are just sitting there waiting for it to fall out of the sky or waiting for something I always wanted God to meet me in dramatic ways. Really big. Make it obvious. I'm slow. And that is not how he does it for me, with me. It would be through one of my kids, or it's usually through another person that I hear God speaking. But how will we know his voice if we're not actively listening for it? Today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. And what about our hearts? Proverbs 4:23 says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Again, it's God's idea that we guard our hearts. Again, we're being active. We're guarding our hearts. How do we do that? We're also taught in the Bible to guard our tongues. Psalm 141:3 David actually asked God to set a guard over his mouth, to keep watch over the door of his lips. But right after those verses, it says, do not let my heart be drawn to evil. He's guarding his heart. Above all else, guard your heart. I often pray that to God, that he would turn my heart from stone to flesh, because I fight against having a hard heart. I think we all do. How does it get that way? Let's talk about it. For some, I think it's because of difficult circumstances that happen early in life. Anybody see Beauty and the Beast this week? Let's just reflect on that fabulous movie for a minute. If you know the story, the Beast is really a prince with a spell or a curse that's been put on him. His mother dies when he's still a child, and his father is cruel. And he becomes cruel like his father. And so he wastes his life on extravagance, overindulgence, including only the people he finds attractive. And when he rejects a poor beggar woman at his castle door, she puts a spell on him, and he turns into a beast, never again to gain his true human likeness unless he learns what? How to love. His heart of stone needs to become a heart of flesh. The death of a parent is life-changing for a child. But there are other things that can affect us for life if they happen when we're young. Parents divorcing, a parent who's absent for any reason. They're sick, they travel a lot. Constant chaos in the home because of unhealthy relationships or unhealthy habits. feeling unwanted by your peers in school like you don't fit in, being ridiculed for things you have no control over, your looks, your family's economic situation, the neighborhood you live in. Maybe you had a health challenge. I remember kids in school getting shut out because they had epilepsy. People were afraid to be around them. You could be rejected for anything that made you seem different from whatever the norm at the time was. I think cultural realities can make our hearts hard. There can be a robotic rhythm to life. You've been there, you're in it, you know what I'm talking about. People walking through their days not really connecting to what or who's in front of them. Ed and I were at a restaurant the other night, and after we put our order in, he asked me if I had noticed the girl who took our order never looked me in the eye. I hadn't noticed. I've had robotic moments too. Maybe I was having one when I gave her my order. So many things in our culture are designed to isolate instead of integrate us. Automated phone systems that make you punch so many numbers to get to a real person, and then mysteriously you get to them and now it's disconnected, right? Bank tellers, I love this one, who remind you that whatever you're at their window for, you can do it quicker online. Yes, I know. But sometimes I just want human contact. Cynicism can harden your heart. We are at an all-time high in that one, folks, right? We do not trust anybody. Our leaders, certainly not the media, not even the people who are supposed to be helping us. Ed and I will leave the dentist office and say, well, I guess we just helped him make his boat payment this month. We wonder if we're being told to do things that are unnecessary. They're always talking about bone loss and deep pockets in our gums, and they're trying to convince you can have the perfect smile, and I don't even know if I want the perfect smile. I remember what a beautiful goodbye speech Conan O'Brien made when he was replaced unceremoniously by Jay Leno on The Tonight Show. Maybe some of you saw it, where he told his fans not to be cynical. Here's what he said: "It's my least favorite quality, and it doesn't lead anywhere." And I love this line. Nobody in life gets exactly what they thought they were going to get. But if you work really hard and you're kind, amazing things will happen. He's protecting his heart. He's guarding his heart. See? Not suggesting that's all there is to life is being kind. But he's onto something. Charlie Daniels, who's 80 years old now and best known for his fiddle playing in the world of country music. Devil went down to Georgia. You know what I'm talking about. Charlie has a memoir. It's coming out this fall, 4 days before he turns 81, and he's titled it, Never Look at the Empty Seats. That is one of my favorite book titles ever. Focus on the people who care about what you're doing, the people who come to the party. How often do we get disheartened because we're focusing on these seats where there's no one? We're focusing on what isn't happening instead of what is. Charlie's guarding his heart. Singer Selena Gomez, the most followed person on Instagram, if you care about that kind of thing, very popular, said in a recent interview with Vogue magazine that the pressures of impressing a crowd and the constant criticism of her work put her in a very lonely place. She was depressed, anxious, and felt like her self-esteem was shot. Being on the road so much, she got disconnected from those who care the most about her. And she says she became plagued with self-doubt. She took a break. She's guarding her heart. Hard-hearted, having a heart that won't bend, won't melt, won't be moved, and don't even try. You met somebody like that before? I did the other day. Mind made up. So I'm talking to him about the new King Kong movie. And before I could get a complete sentence out of my mind, he says, the original is so much better. And I said, oh, you've seen the new one? No, I don't have to. Talk to the hand lady. He's already decided. Okay, discussion over. Our hearts get hardened when we experience repeated painful disappointments over time. Now, all of us experience being let down, not getting the outcome we hope for in a relationship or in a job or at school. But Dr. James Doty, today a neurosurgeon, never thought he would be able to recover enough from his early life circumstances to ever become much of anything. In this book, he talks about his childhood. It's called Into the Magic Shop, a neurosurgeon's quest to discover the mysteries of the brain and the secrets of the heart. He'd been trying to master the art of meditation and relaxation. A friend was helping him. He was trying to stop the negative voices he would hear constantly in his head. He called it the obnoxious DJ, which I took a little issue with. But after one of his meditation sessions with this friend, he goes back home. I went home that day determined to master the art of silencing the obnoxious DJ in my head. My dad was still gone when I got home, and my mom was in her room in bed. I sat in silence in my room, concentrating on turning off the DJ, slowly breathing in and out. But the silence only seemed to make the voices in my head grow louder. I knew my dad was on a drinking binge, and at any moment, he could burst through the door either really drunk or really hungover. It was like this scene in my life was on repeat, playing over and over and over again, always the same. He'd walk in the door, my parents would have a fight, he'd blame her for all of his problems in the past, he would promise that the future would be better, and that would not happen. If anyone in my family noticed me sitting in a chair with my eyes closed, more often than not, they never said anything about it. No one ever asked me what I was doing. No one ever asked me what I was thinking. And they certainly never asked what I was feeling. I could only wonder and worry about what was going to happen when he finally showed up. How would the argument begin? What if my mom overdosed on pills again? I tried to stop thinking, but it was impossible. Would I call the police or an ambulance? Who would I have to talk to? How would I explain my brother hiding under the covers in my room when they came for my mom? Will they take my dad away? I tried to focus my mind on my breathing, but my mind could only conjure up disaster scenario after disaster scenario, each one beginning with my father walking through the front door. It was like there was a tornado about to touch down, but being so frozen in fear you couldn't run and take cover. When were we going to get evicted again? Why did my dad have to drink? Was my mom ever going to get better? When would we have money? Why couldn't I fix my family? What was wrong with me? At the end of the book, he tells a story about being asked to speak at the white coat ceremony for his alma mater, Tulane Medical School. The invitation came 30 years after he graduated, and he was flooded with emotion when he was asked to come and speak. This man, who was often told as a child that he was wasting his time in school, but he credits being able to learn how to open his heart to others as a big part of the reason that he has made it this far. He was an angry young man with a heart of stone that turned to a heart of flesh. Today, the third Sunday in the season of Lent, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. The worship team is going to come back up. We're going to let you go home. One Bible scholar says the reason people forsake the ways of God is because they do not know them. That's why at churchONE we talk a lot about the importance of stopping and resting, delighting, and contemplating in who God is. Because ultimately, we will all follow the voice we know. If Jesus is our shepherd, the one who protects and directs us, the one who has laid his life down for us, how much time and attention is he worth? We're fragile people, but we can find our strength in him. When I think back to the prince in Beauty and the Beast and how he's transformed into his best self once he learns to love and be loved, I think about how I'm being transformed, how you're being transformed the closer you come to understanding the depth of God's love for you. That's one of the hardest things in life to get. Man, if I could just get that, I feel like I could move on. If I could just get that. Receiving his love is what turns your heart of stone into flesh and makes you want to respond to others with love. Today, if you would hear his voice, for he is our God, and we are the people of his pasture.